What's up, TUMNAD lectures? In this video, we are taking a look on the new concept of what we call blood, which is also a component of what we call of the cardiovascular system. If you find this video helpful at the end of it, please make sure you like the video, comment down in the comment section, and please subscribe. Let's go ahead and get started. So now, in the previous videos, we have been looking on other concept of what we call the cardiovascular system components, which was including what we call the human heart and what we call the blood vessels. We looked at all those ones in great detail. If you have not yet watched on that, please go and check because they are fully loaded. In this video, we are going to be now taking on the series of lectures where you're going to be dealing with what we call blood. It's going to be a long kind of the concept, but we shall finish it all within the shortest time interval. Let's go ahead and get started. So now, we're going to be starting off with what we call the basics of what we call blood and generally hematology in particular. We are going to be looking on what we call the basics on what we call the hematology, which is going to be the study of blood. So go ahead and look at what we call the composition of what we call blood, or generally the components, and then finally we shall also look on what we call the functions of what we call blood. Okay, those are the three areas that you are going to be paying much attention in this first lecture of the series of what we call blood. Okay. First, we need to first understand these kind of the common terms, hematology and what we call blood. When you hear the word hematology, it is going to be coming from two words, hem, which means blood, and then logy, which means study. Meaning that hematology is going to be that branch of science which is going to be dealing with the study of what we call blood. As simple as that. Okay. So now, when we talk of hematology, hematology, this one is going to be the science which is going to be dealing with the study of blood. Okay, it means study of blood. As simple as that. Okay, and then when we talk about blood itself, what is blood generally? Blood is going to be a fluid connective tissue that is going to be always circulating inside what we call the blood vessels. As simple as that. Okay, so now when we talk about blood, blood just is going to be a fluid connective tissue. Okay, is a fluid connective tissue. Okay, is a fluid connective tissue that circulates. Is a fluid connective tissue that circulates inside the blood vessels. Inside blood vessels. As simple as that. And it is the only kind of the fluid, liquid connective tissue which is going to be located in what we call the human body. Okay? And then something which is so much important is to know that how much of the volume of the blood does a normal human being contain. A person, for example, of approximately around 70 kilograms, what's going to be the average volume of blood? It is going to be a bit different for the case of male and what we call female. Now, for the case of male and what we call female, the volume of blood which is going to be located in them for a 70 kilogram male or female is going to be a bit slightly different. How different is it? For the case of male, it's going to be having approximately 5 to 6 liters of blood for a male of around 70 kilograms weight. And then for the case of female, it is going to be generally a bit less, approximately 4 to 5 liters. Okay, that is something which is so much important to know. Okay, and then another thing which is so much important, this blood in the body, it accounts for how much of the kilograms on the total body weight. That is also something which is so much basic to know. If you have 70 kilograms, if the blood in your body is accounting for how many kilograms? Generally, it's going to be accounting for approximately around 70%. Okay, so now blood, what we call blood accounts for 7% of total body weight. That is something which is so much beautiful to know, that out of your weight, 7% is going to be contributed by what you call a fluid connective tissue, which you call the blood. It is such another a beautiful thing. So now talking a little bit of what we call the pH of the blood. So now we need to first understand the acidity and the alkalinity of what we call blood. So now what's going to be generally the pH range or the normal pH of what we call blood? When you look on the pH of what we call blood, pH of blood, when you look on the pH of blood. So now when you look on the pH of the blood, blood is going to be a bit slightly alkaline. Slightly alkaline. What's now going to be the pH range? The pH range is going to be generally around 7, going to be around 7.35 to around 7.45. This is going to be the normal standard pH range according to the trusted sources used. Okay? And then the last kind of the basic concept is to know the viscosity, the blood viscosity. Something so much important, what we call blood viscosity. Okay? So now when we talk of blood viscosity, what do we mean? We are trying to mean that's blood's resistance to flow. Okay? The measure of blood's resistance to flow. Now, blood is going to be generally too much viscous compared to what we call water. That is something basic to know. Okay, blood is going to be so much viscous than what we call water, and even also going to be so much thick than what we call the water, approximately around 5 times thicker than what we call water. Okay, so now when we talk about the blood viscosity, is that blood is going to be 5 times viscous. Okay, 5 times viscous. Okay, or 5 times thicker than what we call the water. That is something which is so much basic to know on what we call the blood. Okay. Now that we have seen that, let's go ahead and see what are some of those components of what we call blood. What is going to be composed in blood generally? There are going to be two main categories of the components of the composition of what we call blood. What are the two compositions of what we call the blood? These ones, we have the first one is what we call, which we call the plasma. Okay, we have the first one which we call the plasma, and then the second kind of the component is what we call a cellular component. Okay, we have a plasma component, and what we call a cellular component. These are the two main components of what we call blood. But in these two components, we also have other kind of the substances that make up what we call, like for example, the plasma and what we call the cellular component. To go a little bit on what we call on the cellular component, we are going to be having 3 types of the cells that make up what we call the cellular component. We are going to be having what we call the red blood cells, okay? We are going to be having what we call the white blood cells, and even also what we call the platelets, okay? And by percentage, this kind of the cellular component is going to be a bit slightly less as compared to what we call the blood plasma. How less is it? This kind of the cellular component is going to be generally accounting for approximately 45%. Okay, about approximately around 45%, and for the case of the blood plasma is going to be accounting for approximately 55%. Okay, so now that briefly covers the introductory part on what we call the blood decomposition. We shall go into the detail of each one of these cellular components at a cellular level. Okay, we shall even also go ahead and see what are some of those kind of the ions, some of those components that make up what we call the blood plasma, and even also look on what we call the difference between the blood plasma and what we call the serum, because those kind of the terminologies, they are so much important to understand. Okay, now that we have seen on what we call the blood composition, let's go ahead and finalize on functions of blood. Is blood so much important? If it is important, what are the functions of the blood? Now, there are 3 categories of the functions of the blood. What are the 3 categories of functions of the blood? The first one is going to be a transport role. Okay, the first one is going to be the transport role. The second one is going to be what we call a regulatory role. Okay, a regulatory role, and then the third one is going to be what you call a protection role. So now all these kind of the functions of the blood are going to be under those three kind of the categories. Let's go ahead and see each one of them in great detail. Okay. The first function of what we call the blood is that blood helps in the transport of different kind of the substances. What are these substances? Blood helps in the transport of what we call the nutrients, transport of oxygen, transport of wastes, transport of hormones, and even all other kind of the substances which can be transported in blood. Besides that, we said that blood has that characteristic feature in a way that it can suspend substances or it can dissolve substances in the process of moving it from one place to another. Okay. So now we have said that the first function is going to be transport. It's going to be what we call transport. It's going to be transport of the following: transport of oxygen. Okay. Transport of carbon dioxide. Transport of nutrients. Okay. Transport of nutrients. Transport of hormones. Okay. Transport of hormones. Transport of all other waste products. Okay, other waste products also including what we call the carbon dioxide and even what we call the urea and even all those other kind of the waste products to their site of elimination. So now this is going to be now a transport role of what we call blood. Okay. And then when we come to the protection role, is that the blood is going to be containing a lot of different types of the cells that are going to be helping us in the fighting of what we call diseases. Okay, so now this is going to be now like the first one, and then the second one is that is going to be a protection. Is going to be a protection role. And when we talk of a protection role, is that blood contains blood contains white blood cells, antibodies, antibodies, antibodies which defend the body against infections. Okay, which defends the body against infection. So now that one is going to be now a protection role because that the blood is going to be containing a lot of the white blood cells, a lot of the antibodies that are going to be helping in the process of fighting what we call the infection. Okay. Another kind of the function which is under what we call the protection is that blood is going to be having a lot of the clotting factors, a lot of what we call the platelets that are going to be helping in what we call the process of what we call clotting. Okay. So now another thing is that blood contains clotting factors, what we call clotting factors and platelets and platelets which aids uh, which aids which aids in clotting process or what we call hemostasis. Okay, and by doing that we are going to be limiting on what we call the loss of the blood, and even besides that we are also going to be eliminating the entry of pathogens from the outside environment inside whenever we form that kind of the beautiful kind of the clot. It also makes a lot of sense as one also of what we call the protective role of what we call blood. Okay. And then the last one, which is so much in terms of what we call regulation, is that the blood also helps in what we call regulation of the body temperature following the distribution of what we call heat. As simple as that. Okay. So now the last one is going to be what we call regulation. What we call regulation of body temperature. Okay, regulation of body temperature. Okay, regulation of what we call the body temperature, because as this blood is moving, it's going to be moving heat from one area to another, and by doing that, it is going to be helping in what we call regulation of what we call temperature. Okay, it is also such another beautiful thing. So now that briefly covers the introductory part of what we call hematology and then the blood in particular. Having a quick recap of what we have just said. We said that hematology means the study of what we call blood, and blood is going to be that fluid connective tissue which is going to be circulating inside what we call the blood vessels. We said the normal average volume of the blood is going to be approximately 5 to 6 liters for male, and then 45 liters for case of what you call female. And also said that blood has that ability to suspend or dissolve different substances and is moving it from one place to another. Blood is going to be so much thicker than what we call water, approximately 5 times. Okay, and even also he said that the blood pH is going to be approximately 7.35 to around 7.45, meaning that blood is going to be approximately slightly alkaline. Okay, and then we said that the blood is going to be composed of two main components: the plasma component, which constitutes approximately around 55%, and then the cellular component, which constitutes approximately around 45%. We said that the cellular component is going to be having a lot of different kind of the cells, and the platelets, which are going to be the fragments, and the white blood cells, and even what we call the red blood cells. We moved ahead and looked at what we call the functions of the blood. We said that the functions of blood are categorized into three: the transport role, the regulatory role, and what we call the protection role, or what we call the immune role. Under what we call transport role, we said that blood is going to be helping in the transport of oxygen, transport of the carbon dioxide, transport of the waste, transport of the hormones, and even all other substances from one area to another. Okay, we said that on the case of what we call the protection role, is that blood is going to be containing a lot of what we call the immune cells, the white blood cells, the antibodies, which helps in what we call the fighting of the disease. Besides that, we said that even blood contains a lot of substances like platelets and what we call different kind of the clotting factors that ensures the clotting process goes on well, such that we limit what we call blood loss following an injury, and even also we limit the entry of what we call the pathogens. And then the last one, we said that blood also going to be helping in what we call a regulation of the body temperature following the distribution of what we call heat as the blood moves from one person to another. Okay. So thank you very much for watching. And if you think whatever I've talked is really making sense, is adding to you, you're benefiting, please, you know the deal. Hit like button, comment down in the comment section, and please subscribe. So now in the next video, we are going to be taking a little percentage of the blood in our vagina. We squeeze it through what we call the centrifuging process. We see the three arrangement layer that comes about, and then we go into the detail to name all those kind of the layers. As always, TUMNAD, until we meet next time. Bye bye.